All right, welcome. We're live now on Zoom. Thank you all for joining us. Good afternoon if you're in Australia. Good morning if you're in Israel. We are once again at the Technion Australia webinar where we give you the opportunity to peek into our graduates and scientists and influential leaders of our communities and how they're shaping the world. We've been a little quiet for a few weeks due to the Jewish holiday period, which gives me the opportunity to wish all our listeners and viewers a Shana Tova and happy New Jewish year, and let's hope for a prosperous time to come, and dare I say, a COVID-free time ahead. Speaking of COVID, it has changed our lives in ways that we could never have imagined. No matter where you sit on the political spectrum, what your skin color is, or which God you choose to believe to or not, nobody is immune to the pandemic, and it affects all of us. However, as in most crises, it is the weaker communities of our society who tend to pay and likely to continue to pay a heavier price. And I'm referring to people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, people with disabilities or pre-existing medical conditions, and of course the elderly community. So perhaps today, more timely than ever, we're fortunate to host three change makers with us who have each in their own way dedicated their lives in making a social, environmental, and economic impact. Neta-Li Meiri joins us from Israel. Thank you for coming. Is among many of her claims to fame is a graduate of the elite IDF intelligence unit 8200, and was until recently the managing director of 8200 Impact, which I'm sure she will elaborate on. Kalish is among Australia's most accomplished international consumer product builders and social entrepreneurs, and the wonderful Jessica Roth, who will be moderating the discussion, has been devoting her life to impact investment through her work with the Social Impact Hub. Jessica will also formally introduce our speakers. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ori Danieli. I'm the Executive Director of Technion Australia. And Technion is among the world's leading institutions dedicated to science, technology, and engineering. In Australia specifically, we're part of a worldwide network of associations with a mission to support the Technion by fostering research, collaboration, and encouraging philanthropic support for research, infrastructure, and scholarships. Today's discussion is meant to be interactive, and you're very much encouraged to ask your questions. Just click on the Q&A button. You don't have to wait for that segment. You can do it at any time. And finally, I just wanted to acknowledge our event partners today, which is the University of Technology of Sydney, North Sydney Innovation Network, Social Impact Hub, and the Israeli Embassy in Canberra. Just before we dive in, it is my great pleasure to introduce Ron Gerstenfeld, who is Israel's Deputy Chief of Mission, to formally welcome our guests and speaker. Ron, over to you.
Thank you very much, Toda Rabba, Ori. It's a pleasure. You keep inviting amazing webinars that you're doing during this period. I don't know why, I'm not that attractive, but thank you very much. Actually, it's a real pleasure. First of all, you're doing a wonderful job, and so all of you actually. Thank you, Jono in Northern City Innovation Network. Neta, great pleasure. We are chasing you for about a year to do something with us, so finally we can see you, either virtually, but it is Lance, great pleasure. I've always heard a lot about you. Great work, great job. Jessica, likewise. Just wanted to say that, you know, we're talking about business with purpose, and what you're doing and been doing for all your career actually is doing much more than just, you know, creating and doing things like every entrepreneur would. You're actually contributing to society, which, as Ori mentioned, during COVID time, it's so significant. So in the name of myself and the embassy, we'd like to thank you for all that you're doing for Israel, for Australia, for the world. And that's my pitch. Ori is limiting me in time, like always. So thank you very much. And great success. Thank you. And thank you, of course, UTS, for all the great collaboration that we're having with you. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Ron. It's now my great pleasure to introduce our moderator today, Jessica Roth. Jessica is the founder and director of the Social Impact Hub. Through advice, thought leadership, education, and the mobilization of capital, the Social Impact Hub collaborates with purpose-driven organizations to accelerate change and help create a world where people and the planet thrive. Jess, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ori, and thank you for inviting me here this afternoon or this morning to our Israeli viewers. It's a pleasure to host this for Technion, and we have quite a treat in store for you today. I'm thrilled to be interviewing a good friend of mine, Lance Kalish, and to be welcoming Neta-Li all the way from Israel. So thank you both very much for joining us today. We have quite an interesting discussion in store for you all. And we also have the opportunity to ask questions. So just so you know how this is going to work, I'm going to ask a few questions, and this is going to be a Q&A panel style discussion with hopefully a little bit of vigorous disagreement between our panelists. And then we're going to have plenty of time for questions from the audience. So feel free to pop them in the chat, the Q&A section actually for the questions. Feel free to also introduce yourself in the chat. If you've got anything to say, we always want to start in Australia by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and acknowledge our Indigenous heritage. And so if you want to acknowledge the country on which you land, you're standing, because people are joining us from all around Australia and in fact all around the world, just pop it in the chat. That would be lovely. And if we can get a little bit of a conversation going with some of your thoughts, that would be really nice. So feel free to use the chat function as we go through, and then also use the Q&A to pop your questions in, and we'll get to them a little after 5:35. Open it up to questions from the audience. So that's a little of logistics as to how it's all going to work. Let's get straight into it. So perhaps we can start with our Israeli guest, Neta-Li. So Neta was born and raised in Herzliya, Israel, and she's a graduate of the elite IDF unit 8200. And she has an amazing story to tell about establishing 8200 Impact. And even though she's actually no longer involved in an executive capacity, she's now a member of the board. So I'd like to start with you telling us a little bit about 8200, and then we can go on and talk a little bit about your new role with Nestle. So I might leave the introduction to you about Nestle a little later on, but if we can hear a little bit about your journey and introduce yourself in your own words, and how you created this spin-off, and the origins of it, that would be fabulous. So maybe over to you.
Amazing. So good afternoon, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Neta-Li, born and raised in Israel. As mentioned, I'm an 8200 alumna. Started my military service as an English intelligence analyst. Later on, as an officer, I was the head of the foreign relations section. I worked at 2 different startup companies. One of them was acquired by Intel. The other one is still a successful business. Studied my bachelor's in law at Tel Aviv University, and then practiced civil corporate litigation for 3 years. Hated each and every second of it, and this is why I started volunteering at 8200 Impact. And after more than a year of volunteering, I was offered the best offer in the world to run this program. So I couldn't resist this offer, and so I did. And it's been an incredible 4 years of managing this program. Now I'm a part of the board. And today I run the digital and IT innovation at Nestle, and I work with Israeli startups that their solutions are aligned with Nestle's needs and requirements. So this is in general a bit about me. Regarding 8200, so 8200 is Israel's cybersecurity and signal intelligence unit. It is well known, especially thanks to its successful network of entrepreneurs. Many great startups started at 8200, Waze, Wix, Checkpoint, and other big companies as well. And I think that this is one of the reasons that the 8200 Alumni Association back in 2010 decided to harness its human capital and then to create a significant change through that. So 8200 Impact is the first Israeli social tech accelerator. We promote startups that aim to solve significant social problems through technology in diverse fields of expertise, including people with disabilities, the elderly, gender equality, and as a matter of fact, for all of the problems that are not being solved top-down, we're seeking for solutions bottom-up. This is a little bit about us.
That's a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much. And you're very modest. Neta-Li was named a Global's 40 under 40 most influential people in Israel for her work. So we're very privileged to have you with us. And it's the impact, actually, though, that's really important beyond the sort of external recognition of it. And that is, I think, as someone who runs a social impact accelerator in Australia, we admire the work of 8200 in terms of the diversity of impact areas as well, because we're also impact area agnostic. And it's fabulous to be able to support people with disabilities, women, older people, and all through using tech to solve social problems. So, Lance, perhaps I'll come back to Nestle in a moment, but let me just give Lance an opportunity to introduce himself. He's recognised among Australia's most accomplished international consumer product builders and social entrepreneurs. And if you want to know a bit more about Lance after today's conversation, I can recommend Lance's book, which tells his journey in even more detail than we'll get to in the next 50 minutes. But Lance began his entrepreneurial career, if you like, with co-founding a global skincare brand called Yes2 Inc. And it became the second biggest natural beauty brand in the US and has more than 28,000 stockists today. And that book, Get Big Fast and Do More Good, documents the growth trajectory of Yes2 Inc. And you can buy the products on the shelf of your local supermarket if you're in Sydney. And Lance, you'll have to tell everyone where they can get it if they're elsewhere in the world.
Yes, and your check is in the mail as well. Thanks, Jess, for the free plug.
But Lance hasn't rested with one entrepreneurial venture. In fact, he has founded two businesses relatively recently, one with an embedded social impact, Yubi, which is school and office supplies, and a second, more recently, which we won't really get to today, called Salon Lane, which provides serviced salon studios and flexible workspaces for experienced hair, beauty, and wellness freelancers. And Lance has won Third Sector's Award for Australian Social Entrepreneur of the Year, and he's become a luminary of University of Technology, Sydney. So I think, Lance, if you can tell us a little bit, perhaps about Yubi, because and as you explain your background, I think it would be really great if you could talk about your origins of Yes2, which was a traditional for-profit business. Yes, it was doing good because you were using natural products in the skincare, but so you had a big commitment to natural ingredients. But tell us about the evolution of your journey to found Yubi and why you decided to embed that social mission into Yubi, as you tell us about your trajectory.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Jess. That's a great introduction. Actually, the one thing that I would love to mention is that Yes2 was actually started with my Israeli business partner out of Israel. It was a Israeli brand that was actually made in Arad, which we developed together with another Israeli entrepreneur. And I got to move to Israel and live in Ra'anana and experience my Zionist dream. So that was a fantastic experience. It was that same partner who is Israeli born, a guy by the name of Ido Lefler, who's still my business partner today. We've been business partners for 17 years. And we went on this journey of Yes2. Part of that journey was creating a seed fund. As the business grew out of Israel and we actually moved it to the US, we wanted to do something that gave back at the same time. We created a seed fund. That fund helped us build organic fruit and vegetable gardens in schools all around LA. And one day we were at a school and we ran into some teachers, and the teacher said to us, "Oh, we love what you're doing with organic fruit and vegetables. Do you by any chance have school supplies?" I thought, that's a ridiculous question. You're a public school. Like, why do you need school supplies? And they said to us in our disbelief that in fact, they buy the majority of the school supplies for the kids in their classrooms. And we were shocked. Now, both of our mothers were teachers, and we went back to them and said, "Is this something that you experience when you taught at public schools?" And both of them actually said, "Yes, that's a common thing." And so we took a next step and we started doing some research, and it actually is a problem. So much so that on average, a public school teacher spends $500 out of their own pocket every year to fund school supplies for the kids in their classroom. Now, teachers are not the most well-paid people in the world, so that's a lot of money. And we thought, well, how do we come up with a way that suits our talents, which is in the consumer world, to create a brand and a product and something that can help not only disrupt, which we soon found out later was a very boring, uncreative, and old school category, which being the stationery and school supplies category, but how do we build a socially conscious and impactful business out of that? And that's how Ubi was born. In 2013, we came up with a concept that we could create a new, fun, vibrant, colorful stationery brand, and that for every single product that we sold, we would donate a product to kids in need. And that started in 2013 as a crazy idea. We went to Target USA. We had built an amazing relationship with Target in the US, which is the second biggest retailer in the US, not related at all to the one in Australia, actually. And they had over 2,500 stores. And they immediately, off a PowerPoint, said that they wanted to be involved in this business. Now, this business only worked on scale. The business didn't actually make any sense to be a commercial business if we weren't doing it with massive scale, because we looked at brands like Tom's Shoes, where they made shoes and then gave a pair away. Now, a pair of shoes at Tom's Shoes is a $50 to $100 purchase, whereas we're selling school supplies. The most expensive school supply is $5. How do you give something away and still actually create a viable business? And so doing that with scale meant obviously we could manufacture in volume. And we launched with Target in 2014. And with their partnership, we were able to grow this business to quite a large size, where today we've given away nearly 77 million school supplies and been able to give 5.5 million kids in the US all of their school supplies. So we went on a mission. Today we have well over 200 to 300 different products. We're now not only exclusively sold in Target, we're sold in many, many other retailers in the US. We're sold online and on Amazon. And we've been able to really affect and show examples of how you can create socially conscious businesses, attract capital for those businesses, and attract amazing market-rated, highly rated employees to become part of that business. So that was my journey with Ubi, and why we decided that we could do the same thing that we did with Yes2, but we could build something that was more meaningful, more impactful, and even have a commercial outcome while doing that. But more importantly, creating something really special and impactful.
Wow, that's fabulous. Thank you so much, Lance. Thank you for sharing that wonderful journey and decision that you took, and those 5.5 million kids that you mentioned, I think are very grateful. I'm sure are very grateful for having all their school supplies, and especially all those teachers who don't have to spend the $500 out of their own pocket to buy their kids the school supplies. So that's fabulous. I think it's interesting to, but I am going to prompt you a little further on the impact of the business, because the philanthropic impact is amazing, and we've acknowledged that. What about the environmental impact and the actual impact in the business itself? So in social impact language, we'll call that embedded impact, because ideally, as the business grows, it is having more positive impact, which it is in the sense that as you get to scale, you're able to give more, which is awesome. The other side of it is, are you able to employ more disadvantaged people? Are you cutting down more trees to create more notebooks that then, so how do you assess the trade-off of impacts? Because everything that we do has an impact, some positive, some negative. And this is sort of a little more nuance in the actual business model as to where the supplies come from, and actually trying to make sure that we're maximizing positive impact in the production of the goods, as well as generating profit to give to good.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, and the only answer to that is that it's a trade-off, and you have to start somewhere. So there are, the first trade-off that people make is, do you want to be a complete social not-for-profit enterprise versus do you want to be what I describe ourselves as a socially conscious for-profit enterprise? That's a trade-off completely. So there are amazing social enterprises out there, and these people do amazing stuff. The difference between us and them is that we were able to affect 5.5 million kids in a period of less than 7 years, where I've seen social enterprises that have been around for 20, 30 years, haven't affected 10% as many people as we have. And it's not a competition, I'm just talking about obviously the trade-off.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that they are consistently trying to raise funds through donors. It's a completely different model. I'm a massive believer in the socially conscious or socially conscious capitalism and socially conscious entrepreneurism. And just like when I started Yes2, Yes2 was a natural beauty product. However, we were definitely not the most natural product at all. We actually found ourselves in between a world of hardcore, what I call hardcore greenies. And the hardcore greenies would buy a product that cost a hell of a lot of money, that came in a glass bottle only, and that basically made you smell like tulips and lavender. Most people wouldn't buy it, except the people who were prepared to make all the trade-offs. Then there were obviously the beauty brands on the other side of the scale that contained all the nasty ingredients you could think of. Basically try to make the product as cheap as possible in plastic bottles that were as damaging to the earth as possible, but they made lots of money because of that brand. What we found is that we needed to appeal first to the people that we called light greens. And that's what I am. I'm a light green person. Very happy to admit it. What does that mean? That means that I use natural moisturizer on my face, but right now I'm wearing Nivea deodorant. Nivea deodorant is, I think, proven to kill you. But the reason I wear it is because I can't find a natural deodorant that doesn't make me not smell. And that's my personal choice.
Your honesty.
I'm being honest, yeah. So my personal choice is that I don't believe that there is a product out there that is A, the right price, and B, the right quality. And what we found is that you've got to create a product that is within 10% of what the rest of the market is creating. So the conventional products out there, 10% in terms of the price premium. So, why doesn't everyone buy a Tesla today? It's an electrical car. Why doesn't everyone buy a hybrid? And the only reason is because it's expensive. If hybrids and Teslas were the exact same price as Toyotas and Hyundais, everybody would buy them because nobody would find any other reason, to spew those type of fumes into the air when they can drive electric. It's price driven. And so for us to be able to achieve the pricing, that price premium that works, which enabled us to access the masses. And by accessing the masses, we could start to move the needle a lot more. We had to make some trade-offs. Now we knew that as we grew with volume, we could get better and better and better and make better decisions. And what we did is our notebooks became FSC sourced, which is forest certified. Our plastic became better sourced as well. Everything that we tried to do became more sustainable. Now, we're not even close to being where I would love to be. But once again, it's a slow trade-off. As you get bigger, you take the rest of the community with you. And I look now, we talk about a natural beauty brand today. I say, great, I started a natural beauty brand. And people go, well, everyone has natural beauty brands. It's not new. Well, in 2006, it was quite new. And we were considered, quite market pioneers at that stage. Today, what makes me really proud is I go to Priceline or Mecca or Sephora, and almost all of the brands that I see have changed and substituted all of their nasty ingredients for more natural ingredients because now it's a given. And that was market driven by customers who we were a huge part of making them aware that you can buy a great product that is good quality for the right price, and you don't have to substitute with terrible ingredients. And that forced the big guys like J&J and P&G and L'Oreal and all of these guys to change the ingredients in all of their products. And now we're on to the next thing. So that's actually what really gets me proud. And you've got to do it slowly. You've got to hit the masses. And I've always been in mass retail to make big impact.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for that honesty, Lance. I think it's really interesting hearing that reflection, and certainly entrepreneurship, broadly, business is a tool to have big impact. And that's sort of what we're talking about here. Business with purpose is a tool to have big impact, and totally agree with you. There is a super important role for philanthropy. Philanthropy needs to stay focused on those problems that can only be solved through philanthropy, where there is no business model, and try and solve the problems that we can solve through a business model by using a business model. And making it as strong as possible and as effective as possible to do that. So completely agree with you on the entrepreneurship and the capital. And I love your pragmatism as well. You're being pragmatist and trying to bring along the mass market with you and shape consumer behavior as you go. So,
by the way, Jessica,
but I want to come back to the point about trade-off and come to you, Neta.
Yes.
It will be really interesting to hear you reflect on the broader point about trade-offs.
Right.
Because there certainly are trade-offs, and I'd love to hear you if you can talk about it in your entrepreneurial experience at E200, and then also in your role at Nestle. So you're now innovation director at Nestle, and I think inside big corporates, there's also a lot of trade-offs taking place.
Right.
In shared value, the first wave of shared value makes a lot of sense. You can take initiatives that cut costs and make money and have positive impact. Great. But the second wave is a lot harder, and it's all trade-offs. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the trade-offs that you might have to manage at Nestle?
Right. So first, I really wanted to relate to Lance's response regarding all the matters that you arose. I think it's a very important compensation on one each other. I can also say regarding other aspects in social impact that sometimes it's a social enterprise, but maybe the funding will be through third parties that are not necessarily the people in need. For example, in the medical world, so if you get to have a reimbursement mode, so the person in need is the person who gets this treatment, but on the other hand, the entity that pays for it is the insurer, for example. So, I think that one of the main challenges in social impact is also finding who could pay, whether it could be affordable at scale. And this is one of the things that social entrepreneurs are constantly contemplating, because they want to do good. They don't want to charge too much to consumers who are usually the people in need. And then you just need to balance these two. So you asked me a little bit about Nestle. I don't want to be an advocate of Nestle, but I can say that prior to joining Nestle, I read a lot about their corporate social responsibility. And I think that even one of the largest multinationals in the world, the 33rd largest company actually, can do good while doing well. I know specifically about Nestle that they are very focused on diversity and inclusion, and that 42% of the managerial positions are being held by women, which is a very high number considering other companies. I know about Nestle's efforts in the bottom of the pyramid countries like India, that they're trying to work on infrastructure to having water reservation and proper nutrition as a food and beverage company. And I know that there are many efforts in this domain of also packaging and sustainability. There is a target by 2025 to have a full transformation into recyclable or reusable packages, which is going to be a huge impact in this environmental field. So we get to see more and more businesses that don't only care about the money, but also about the environment and about other causes. We get to see it through corporate social responsibilities, and also not, as reports, but rather also in their activities in trying to minimize the social gaps between societies, between genders. And I truly hope that more and more companies will join this challenge in making the world more equal and to prove that you can do good while doing well.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Thank you. And it's great to see what Nestle is doing. And I would say what Nestle is doing is beyond corporate social responsibility. You know, that's sort of the old language nowadays, where companies, it sort of was part of their license to operate, and it was a marketing function where they gave money. But now it's actually much more than that. It's actually embedded in the business model,
right.
And actually trying to do well by doing good and using the business skills and talents to do that. I know you're at the very beginning of your journey. Can you tell us what you think might be on the horizon?
It's a
what do you think
question.
Might be to come?
Yeah, so first I think that regarding packaging and sustainability, I can say that just recently Nestle launched a corporate VC dedicated to investing in startups in the sustainability and packaging domain. I can say that the CEO, Mark Schneider, continues talking about smart packaging all the time. There are many efforts in order to reduce waste and to have a smarter recycling process. So I could say that many resources also in the, of course, digitalized processes are dedicated towards this direction. I truly hope to see more and more people of color and diversity in terms of senior management as well, but it seems like things are progressing towards this direction, and I'm sure that the next few years, especially on the after COVID, that we will dedicate a whole different question to that, will surely be very significant for the social development of the company.
Okay, so that's really interesting. Let's talk about COVID, given that you raised it. Lance, what do you think will be the impact of COVID on specifically the social enterprise sector and the trend of more and more businesses embedding purpose? Do you think it's set to accelerate? Many commentators are saying that. What's your view?
Well, I think that there's two sides to it. I mean, it's very hard to ignore the economic impact and the financial impact to the sector. So I was reading a report that said philanthropy next year is forecasted to be about 12% down. Obviously, corporates are tightening their purses. Everybody is looking at their budget and in as much detail as possible. And unfortunately, when you're forced to look at your budget, people often go for the social side of the budget and the CSR and all the places which are considered long-term parts of the business. That's actually one of the reasons why we started UBI, because I remember when we sold Yes2 to some private equity guys, whenever it was time for budget cuts, for those guys, it was, well, let's just cut the seed fund a little bit more and give less because we need more to go down to the bottom line. That's how I knew when you start a company, you have to embed a social mission from the beginning and make it actually part of your culture in order to do that. So I think it's hard to ignore the fact that if corporates are not spending as much and philanthropists are not giving as much, it's going to affect the entire social enterprise sector. And that means, lower output. So I hate to be, a little bit of a Debbie Downer. But from that point of view, I think that's going to be a big effect. Of course, you're going to have a lot of people who are looking for jobs and laid off. And I think with what's been building is a greater desire to work for either companies or social enterprises that are, do more impact or have more impact and are just more meaningful. I mean, a lot of people have been able to just look at their lives again. I mean, there's no one who hasn't been affected by COVID and looked at their life and said, wow, I'm definitely going to change this for the good. I mean, I used to travel, I commute between Sydney and LA every 6 weeks for the last 10 years. I now haven't traveled in 7 months. So besides the fact that my wife and children don't know what to do with themselves, I've actually never been happier. And I have really set out to try and change, my life. And I'm actually, when travel does come back, if it ever does come back, they keep on saying it's a year, it's 6 months, it's who knows. I will definitely change the way that I do business. And I think many people who now go look for their new opportunities will look for companies that are genuine and authentic when it comes to social and impact culture built within their company.
Really interesting. So I'd love you to comment as well, Neta, on the prediction for the future, and perhaps also, given the diversity of entrepreneurs that you've seen, maybe you can also look back a little bit in terms of major mistakes in the past that you think we can learn from in terms of looking forward at the future with the effect of COVID. What should we make of this?
Sure. So regarding COVID, I think I'll split my answer into two. Maybe the positive sides, if you can even define it this way, is that COVID was a great catalyst for digital transformation. There is actually a joke that asks, who is the main leader of digital transformation in your company, whether it's the CEO, the innovation manager, or COVID. And actually, COVID is a great, if we could call it this way, resource for digital transformation, for understanding that not everything should be based on flights and long negotiations, connections with startups, and even implementing POCs does not even require meeting face-to-face. You can do everything online. You can do everything within processes that used to take years now take sometimes even weeks or so. And we can see a progress in this. And of course, companies needed to have quick and efficient solutions to all problems that arose during time. So I think that in this direction, we'll have to see more and more innovations in companies, more and more collaborations with startups. I will say that maybe there is also some Darwinism in terms of startups, because startups that were not well established during COVID, it was very hard for them to seek for investments, to raise money either from angel investors, private investors, or from VCs, whether these are social enterprises or regular startups without any affiliation to social impact, because this time was very hard. I feel that more and more investors were leaning towards specific directions of what's going to solve the most significant problems that the world is now handling during COVID. So this is like, it's a half optimistic and half pessimistic. I will also say in the pessimistic aspect that more and more SDGs, social development, sustainable development goals of the UN are receiving more and more attention now. Poverty, inequality, economic development, hygiene and sustainability, all of these issues will have to be solved now. We can see that the major problems around this, around people's access to telemedicine and to other important resources that a lot of people cannot handle, and the high rates of unemployment, it will create huge differences and gaps in the society. And I think that tech would be a good catalyst in order to try and solve these problems, either by employing people remotely, either by giving access to people that used to live in the outskirts and will not need to drive every day to work and use carbon and waste their time. And as Lance mentioned, also spend more time with the family and be more close to your surroundings, which are things that we all used to travel very heavily, especially people that hold global interactions. And I think that now this is the understanding of how many things can be done from our living room and how things can be done efficiently, quickly, and even more, even like in a lower rate and much in a very saving way in terms of money. So I think that these things are here to stay. I think that all of the inequalities in the society would even grow deeper, which is a thing that should be handled by, of course, startups and technology, but also by the governmental interference, and will give incentives to new businesses, not necessarily startups, and can also try and bring people back to this circular of work, because it seems I can say about Israel that the condition is not so great. We have around 23% of unemployment, and I assume, and I'm afraid that the numbers will only rise.
Yeah, it's definitely two sides of the coin, right? There's a lot of reasons to be pessimistic and also some reasons to be optimistic, because there are some businesses that are experiencing black swan events, taking advantage of these trends and the engine of digital transformation that you spoke about. It's quite a nice phrase that COVID is this engine. There are some telehealth businesses we're supporting that have just experienced huge demand. Or an example that you're all familiar with, Zoom. We're all on Zoom now, right? Like that's an example of a business that existed before COVID, of course, but had experienced a massive growth as a result of this disruption, and probably one that's going to stay, because as you say, Lance, you're not going to go back to doing business the way that you used to. You're going to utilize these new tools.
One example which really comes to mind, which is, as I said, I was a little bit negative, but a great example of a social enterprise that has taken advantage of the times because they're just in the right category. And it's my favorite social enterprise because of the category it's in Australia, and that's Thank You. And Daniel Flynn, who's the founder of Thank You, which is a fully not-for-profit social enterprise. They give all of their profits away. They are, anyone who's not familiar with them, I think, Nat, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but anyone who lives in Australia knows Thank You. They do hand soap and shower gels, and they've expanded into all different types of personal care items. Music, brilliant. Started with water. They've obviously been in an area of high demand and done exceptionally well, but their growth has always been completely restrained because of their inability to raise capital, because they're a full social enterprise. No one, investors are not going to put their money into it. It needs to be philanthropic donors. And they have taken all the money that they've made and used the opportunity to they've generated a campaign that started a couple of days ago, basically to reach out to Unilever, Procter & Gamble, and a couple of the other biggest players, and I wonder if Nestle is one of them, and basically said to them, we want to take Thank You from Australia to the rest of the world, where they've been able to, all of their profits goes to alleviating world poverty. And they are trying to make a global play, which would have not been possible if it wasn't for COVID. And they've basically given 30 days to hold a meeting with the senior executives of both of those companies and ask them to become the distribution partners internationally for Thank You. It's a crazy campaign. Guys, incredibly bold, but just an example of someone who has taken it from something small to something global, and really all off the back of the success they've had in COVID.
That's amazing. That's a really good example. Thank you for sharing. Who Gives a Crap is another, given the run on toilet paper that we experienced in Australia. They have made more money than they've ever made. But that's an amazing story for Thank You. And they've always done things differently. Even the book that he wrote, Chapter 1, was a horizontal book, and pay what you can and donate what you can. And they've always disrupted the rule book. So it's great to see them doing that again. I want to go to some of the questions from the audience, because we have quite a lot that have come through.
Wonderful.
Some in the chat that you can see, and some that perhaps you can't. So Neta, I think if we can start with you, there's a really interesting question here from Yahal. Maybe if we start there. So in a large corporation like Nestle, how do you deal with areas of the business that might contradict your social belief system, both when looking in the mirror and when asked by externals? And the example that he gives is Nestle robbing water from drought victims for profit.
Oh, that's a tough one.
The big tough question.
As mentioned, I'm not Nestle's advocate. I know about great activities in the CSR, great social initiatives, both coming from employees and commercialization of wonderful initiatives that employees develop within the company. So to be quite honest, I'm not sure about all these allegations, and I cannot really honestly refer to that because I have no additional information in addition to what Yochai wrote. I did talk about all of the efforts regarding sustainability and packaging and diversity and the things that the senior management is very aware of. So to be quite honest.
And are they still, do you know if they're still doing both CSR and the sustainable smart packaging, or if they're moving funding from CSR to both?
It's a combined effort.
Yeah.
Many resources are being allocated towards this direction, and a huge amount of money is being invested in this. Sorry, I cannot refer to these.
No, that's great. So you've answered Roz's question as well then. So thank you, Roz, for your question about, and the answer is both, which is great. You also mentioned earlier about Nestlé's new corporate VC, which is investing in startups focused on packaging and sustainability, which is great. That's impact investors. And that's maybe a good segue to talk a little bit about a question from that's just popped up in the chat. I'm in the impact investing space and continue to see investors more and more leading the fight to truly transform businesses rather than just traditional CSR efforts. The ability to financially measure value beyond programs is nearly here, with many global impact initiatives aggregating. What tips can you provide for profit, purposeful businesses? So a really interesting question. I don't know, Lance, if you want to have a go at this, and Netta, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and actually something that I was thinking about in terms of why many of the benefits that have come about with regards to choosing and embedding social missions into your business. We found, and we get approached, very often, and in particular in America, by funds that are being set up, and they are early stage funds investing in typically private equity stage companies that are only based on ethical investing and impact investing. So different to yourself, Jess, it's by no means, trading off anything with regards to return. It's literally saying that we only invest in businesses that are doing good, but also have the same level of ROI capabilities than any other business that we would invest in. So they actually seek out particular businesses, and UB falls quite well into that. I'm very proud to say that UB is a profitable company, and we've tried to make it profitable every single year, so that we can continue to reserve cash and grow organically and internally, and so that we can continue to make the types of decisions that we want to make all the time by ourselves, and not be driven by too many external or bank or any external funding people. Of course, it's important to have that as part of your business as well in order to grow. So I don't know if that completely answers the questions. It's a little bit off track, but the other tips that I've learned and what's attracted those is thinking about your company when you start off embedding the social mission into the incorporation and the growth and development of your company. You think about it from the beginning, what your path is, and you operate like a commercial thinking company. You make decisions based on commercial viability, not necessarily decisions based on impact only. It's a balance that you are consistently doing. And this goes back to that trade-off that I was speaking about earlier on, where yes, we would love to be completely sustainable packaging, but that would create the cost of our product and the retail pricing of our product to go so far above what I call, as I said, the 10% premium, that it would naturally affect our sales, which would naturally affect the value of our company, which would make us look less attractive to external funding. But I am a big supporter of attracting external capital so that you can use those funds to grow quicker and to grow bigger. You will have to make sacrifices while you grow quickly as well, because if you grow too quickly, you are going to definitely have to make big decisions that are going to drive many of your supporters away. I use an example, our biggest competitor, when we were in the beauty game, the natural beauty game with ES2, our biggest competitor was Burt's Bees. Sure, everyone's heard of Burt's Bees, their lip balm, and now a massive company. Well, while we were competing against them, Burt's Bees sold to a big company called Clorox. Now, most Australians don't know Clorox, but every American knows Clorox because Clorox is the biggest bleach company in the world. And so the most natural beauty brand sold to the company that was literally poisoning the environment. And there was absolutely massive opposition, and they lost a lot of loyal, long-term supporters. Unfortunately,
interesting story. Yeah, really interesting story. And I think you're right. The only thing that's coming, which another question gets to, in relation to how do you define impact and how do you measure it, it sort of goes to this point, and it's also made in the previous question around the ability to measure value beyond finance, if you like, beyond you say beyond programs, but it's really beyond the bottom line, is nearly here. And that is sort of what we're calling impact weighted accounts. So when we can get, this is a concept that is being advocated by Sir Ronald Cohen, who's one of the pioneers of impact investing. And if you're interested to hear more about that, he's actually speaking at an Israeli Innovation Summit in a couple of weeks. He's talking Israeli-Australian Innovation Summit with the AICC. He's talking about this because he's really pushing at the moment the adoption of impact weighted accounts so that companies can fully capture the social or environmental impact, positive or negative, in their financial returns. So that then, Lance, your point about, well, a 10% price premium or whatever it's not as real, because if you capture all of the externalities in the accounts, then actually some businesses are going to be way more investable than others. Obviously, that's a big disruption to the financial system, but that's sort of what he's suggesting. That's a really, really interesting point.
If I can also hop on and answer the same question.
Sure.
Yes. So as I mentioned before, I think, many social entrepreneurs are very eager to make literally an impact, a real change. But sometimes I think that the main challenge is to understand who will pay for it and why. So previously I gave an example of medical tech startups that can do it on a reimbursement mode as a good example of, assisting the people they need on one hand, but finding a proper funding for it on the other hand. And I think that also relating other startups in fields of employment, the government might be also interested. They have an incentive to bring people back to work, especially during COVID and post-COVID times. And I think this is one of the main challenges because there is this misconception about social entrepreneurs that they only seek to do good, which is awesome, but usually investors don't see these startups as viable in terms of financial ROI and return on investment. So the problem is that I think that once you encrypt a good and a solid business model, it really helps you to drive it. And first, to find the relevant investments, your pitch is much more articulated, and you really understand how you can make impact, but also to be a sustainable business and a for-profit. Because saying that I'm a for-profit social company, like, you should not be ashamed at it. Everybody needs to make a living, and you just need to find the right way and the incentives of the right figures and people to fund it.
That's right, for profit, for purpose. And actually that business model enables you to do more good more quickly, to use the byline from your book, Lance, because then you can reinvest and grow and scale and take external investment and have more impact. And this is a sort of question that we all, or aspiration that we all have, to do more
Absolutely.
good.
I'm a big supporter as well of also responsibility from corporates as well. And one of the things I speak about is, how being good is good for business. We've shown that with UBI, you can, just so people know, we partner with, and this is a big difference between many other social enterprises, we partner with a organization called the Kids in Need Fund, which is actually the organization which executes the giving of the product to the schools that need it. So we decided that we are not going to be the operations side on choosing who the schools, especially in the country the size of the US, who need it the most, identifying who the people are, and actually distributing the particular boxes that we are giving them and all the supplies that we're giving them to them. So we combined with this company, and we give this company millions and millions of dollars through supplies and all these other things. And that has been a partnership that has enabled our company to become a socially conscious company. Now, there are so many examples, and Nesta is one of them, but there are so many examples of smaller companies as well that are working together with a chosen, selected, not-for-profit organization that does that side of the social impact for them. And my hope, and what I'd love people to push, and I think it needs to eventually come from a government level, is that every company, when they incorporate, has to choose, just like you choose a tax election, just like you choose a tax agent, you need to be able to also choose who your partner for social impact is going to be. So, there's been the 1% for the planet, and there's been all these different types of them, which are great, but they're driven by those organizations. Imagine if the government says, okay, part of your corporate responsibility, you can be for profit, you can pay your taxes, but you also need to do that. And what I've proven, and what I continuously speak about and present to other corporates, is how do you find that authentic social enterprise partner that doesn't only make your company feel good, your employees feel good, but they actually elevate your brand. They do good for you, which in turn creates more business, better customers, better awareness, and a greater overall, bottom line for your business. So if we can find a way through the likes of the Ronald Cohens and industry, pushing governments and run people like yourself as well to implement that type of thing at the beginning of a company's life, I think that's something that eventually will just be a given. And that will be a great world to be.
What a fabulous note to end on. Ori, do we have a last word from Neta-Li, or we're out of time? Can we have a last piece of advice from you, Neta-Li? And what do you want a parting message, especially about Israel as the startup nation? You've got a question we haven't got to about researchers and commercializing research. It's one of the amazing things that Israel does so well, including at the Technion. What's your advice? Parting word of wisdom.
Yeah, so we can speak forever about why Israel has become the startup nation. And I think that the fact that Israel is on a constant survival mode, and the fact that it's surrounded by enemies, and needs to think out of the box and to have like a better innovation model now. And I think it's also thanks to the huge support of the IDF technological units as well. And to the strong support of the government that provides with funding, and especially the Israeli Innovation Authority. So if I need to give maybe 2 tips for the entrepreneurs in the audience, because we did try to mention the common mistakes, but then we got swiped into a whole other discussion, which was fascinating. I think that we can point at maybe 2 do's for entrepreneurs. So the first one would be create your market validation, because one of the things that I managed to see is that many entrepreneurs do not invest enough resources in understanding their market and the barriers, either regulation or lingual or cultural differences. And the other one is thinking about an investment not as the holy grail, seeing investment as only a part and a milestone and not the target. And once you get an investment, this is your time to prove yourself to the investor and to prove to them that you are worth the shot, and to create your business and try to penetrate into the relevant markets. So these are my ending notes.
Kol hakavod.
So that ends.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much. Back to you, Ori. I know you want to wrap up at 6 o'clock. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's good. I know we could have gone for much longer. It's always time flies when you're having fun, especially when you hearing such inspiring words. And
Sure
this was such an inspiring hour, and I hope it added value. I'm sure it added value to our listeners today. And personally, it's very much in line with what the Technion's motto is Tikkun Olam. And for those who are familiar with that term, it's like making the world a better place. And it drives most of the research that's been conducted all the time. So it's great to hear. I just wanted quickly to thank our partners again, UTS, NSIN, Social Impact Hub, and the Israeli Embassy. And of course, thank our speakers for giving up their time, Neta-Li and Lance, who I know tomorrow is launching another business. You've got a lot on. Good luck with your Salon Lane, which you should find out a bit more about. And of course, Jessica for giving up your time. Just a quick note about our upcoming event. So we've got another one coming up at the end of the month, on the 29th of October, with Professor Marcel Makhlouf, who's speaking of people of impact. She probably, holds the flag in Israel. She was Israel's Woman of the Year, and she's one of the top researchers in the country. And she's going to talk alongside researchers from Baker Heart and Diabetes Institute about breakthroughs and innovation in heart, diabetes, and cancer research. It's going to be fascinating. I will send you all a link to join. And finally, when you sign off, you'll get a survey, which should take about less than a minute to complete and will help us improve our practice if you can do that. And again, thank you all. Keep well. And until next time, take care. Thank you all. Bye-bye.